Have you ever woken up after 8 hours of sleep and still felt completely exhausted? Have you ever crashed hard at 3 in the afternoon for no clear reason at all? Or noticed your belly slowly expanding even when your diet hasn't changed? If any of that sounds familiar, this video is for you. Because here's what nobody tells you. After 50, chronic stress doesn't just make you feel anxious or overwhelmed. It triggers a completely different hormonal response, one that physically reshapes your body. The hormone doing that reshaping is cortisol, and it has been leaving very specific physical clues for longer than you may realize. If you've already watched our last video, you know how cortisol works at the cellular level. Today, we go one step further. In the next 11 minutes, I'm going to show you 5 physical signals your body is sending right now. No blood work, no lab test, you just need to know what to look for. Before the 5 signals, let's be clear about what changes after 50. 3 biological shifts make cortisol significantly harder to regulate. First, your adrenal glands become more reactive. Smaller stressors spike cortisol harder than they did at 35. Second, cortisol clearance slows. The hormone lingers in your bloodstream longer, especially overnight. Third, the feedback loop that tells your body to stop producing cortisol becomes less precise with age. Together, these 3 shifts create the conditions for chronic accumulation, even in people who feel relatively calm. Most people assume cortisol is only a problem when they feel actively stressed. That is the first and most expensive misunderstanding. Chronic cortisol elevation is not about how stressed you feel in the moment. It's about how your body has adapted to sustained low-grade activation, often over months or years. But at the biological level, your HPA axis has been running above baseline for a very long time. The 5 signals in this video are the physical evidence of that process. So let's move through each one, starting with the most visible, ending with the most misunderstood. I'll explain what each signal means biologically. I'll tell you exactly what makes each one different after 50 compared to younger adults. And each signal connects back to the mechanism from the last video, but now you're seeing it from the outside in. At the end, I'll give you 3 concrete reset actions you can start today. Signal 1. The shape of your belly, not just the size. Most people think expanding belly fat means they're simply eating too much. But cortisol changes where your body stores fat, not just how much. Visceral fat, the fat packed around your liver and intestines, has 4 times more cortisol receptors than fat elsewhere. That receptor density is why cortisol sends a direct chemical signal to deposit fat in the abdomen. This is different from diet-driven weight gain, which distributes more evenly across the body. The specific pattern to notice: fat concentrated in the lower abdomen and around the waist, even when arms and legs remain lean. Here's what makes this different after 50. Before menopause, estrogen partially offsets cortisol's abdominal fat deposition signals. After menopause, or as testosterone declines in men, that hormonal buffer disappears. The same cortisol level that caused modest belly changes at 35 causes far more visceral accumulation at 55. A study of 2,527 adults aged 54 to 87 measured long-term cortisol through hair samples. It found that higher cumulative cortisol strongly predicted larger waist circumference independent of diet or caloric intake. That study was published in the journal Obesity in 2017. Signal 2. The afternoon energy crash, and when exactly it hits. Cortisol follows a natural daily rhythm. It peaks within 30 minutes of waking, that's your morning activation signal. Then it gradually declines through the day. But in people with chronically elevated cortisol, this rhythm becomes disrupted. Instead of a smooth decline, cortisol drops sharply in the early afternoon, typically between 1 and 3 p.m. That drop triggers a rapid fall in blood sugar and mental alertness. If you find yourself reaching for coffee or sugar around 2 in the afternoon, that's not a discipline problem. Here's what makes this different after 50. In younger adults, the adrenal glands compensate quickly, releasing a secondary pulse to stabilize energy. After 50, adrenal reserve capacity declines, so that compensation is slower and less complete. The crash hits harder, lasts longer, and is often mistaken for normal aging fatigue. The Whitehall 2 study tracked cortisol rhythms in thousands of middle-aged working adults. It found that a flattened cortisol slope, where cortisol stays elevated late into the day, was linked to chronic fatigue. That pattern became significantly more common after 50, and it did not resolve with more sleep. Signal 3. Waking up between 2 and 4 in the morning and not knowing why. Most people over 50 assume fragmented sleep is simply part of getting older. But there is a specific cortisol-driven waking pattern that is distinct from normal aging. In a cortisol-overloaded system, HPA axis activity doesn't fully quiet down at night. Cortisol levels, which should be lowest between midnight and 3 a.m., remain elevated instead. Your brain reads that hormonal activity as a low-grade threat signal. You wake up often with a slightly elevated heart rate. Not from a nightmare, just from cortisol. Here's what makes this different after 50. In younger adults, the HPA axis can pull elevated night cortisol back down within minutes. After 50, that self-correction is slower and less precise. The waking comes earlier in the sleep cycle, recovery takes longer, and deep sleep is significantly reduced. A 2020 study published in Nutrients followed healthy older adults and measured cortisol changes during sleep. Those with higher overnight cortisol had more frequent waking episodes and significantly less time in deep sleep, even when total time in bed was identical. Here's the key insight, the one that changes how you think about this signal. Fragmented sleep doesn't just result from elevated cortisol, it actively amplifies it. A disrupted night raises your cortisol awakening response the following morning. And if the underlying triggers aren't addressed, the cycle compounds night after night, week after week. Signal 4. Slow recovery from stress, measured in time, not in intensity. This signal is harder to notice because it's not something you see, it's something you measure in time. After a stressful event, a difficult conversation, a deadline, unexpected news, cortisol spikes. In a healthy system, return to baseline takes roughly 20 to 40 minutes. In someone with chronic cortisol overload, the spike is larger and the return to baseline is significantly slower. You might still feel tense, irritable, or wired 3 to 4 hours after something that wasn't objectively that bad. Here's what makes this different after 50. Younger adults have more flexible glucocorticoid receptor sensitivity. That means their cells respond efficiently to cortisol's off signal when the stressor is gone. After 50, receptor sensitivity declines and the body stays in activation mode longer, even as cortisol starts to drop. Recovery time stretches from minutes to hours and sometimes carries over to the next day. Research in cortisol reactivity has identified a consistent pattern in older adults. Recovery speed after stress, not peak cortisol level, is the stronger predictor of chronic HPA dysregulation. And that recovery lag worsens measurably after 50, especially in adults managing multiple ongoing stressors. Signal 5. The craving for sugar or starchy food immediately after a stressful moment. This is the most misunderstood signal on this list. Most people treat post-stress cravings as a willpower failure. That framing is incorrect, and it keeps people trapped in the cycle. When cortisol is chronically elevated, it disrupts the brain's dopamine reward pathways. Your brain begins to rely on quick glucose hits to generate a temporary sense of calm and control. Cortisol also triggers gluconeogenesis, releasing stored glucose into the bloodstream. Insulin surges to manage that glucose, and when insulin drops, the brain fires a strong hunger signal for sugar or starch. Here's what makes this different after 50. Insulin sensitivity declines with age, so the glucose-insulin cycle runs with less precision. Blood sugar swings become wider, and the craving signal grows significantly stronger. This is why stress-driven eating accelerates visceral fat gain specifically after 50 and rarely before. A study in psychoneuroendocrinology tracked food cravings and cortisol patterns in stressed adults over 6 months. It found that higher daily cortisol, not overall stress perception, was the primary predictor of increased sugar cravings. This matters because it confirms that the craving isn't in your head, it's in your hormones. The first reset is about timing specifically, your morning cortisol window. Cortisol naturally spikes within 30 minutes of waking. That's normal and necessary. The problem is what most people do inside that window. Checking your phone or email in the first 30 minutes loads the HPA axis before your stress buffer is fully engaged. Instead, commit to a 30-minute phone-free window after waking. No messages, no news, no decisions. This single change reduces cortisol awakening response dysregulation, the biological driver behind signal 2 and signal 3. Research in behavioral cortisol biology suggests this simple delay can reduce morning cortisol spikes by 10 to 20%. The second reset targets the afternoon crash from signal 2. The instinct is to push through more coffee, more stimulation, more effort. After 50, that instinct actively works against you. Pushing through the crash raises cortisol further, the exact opposite of what your body is trying to complete. Instead, treat the 1 to 3 p.m. window as a biological signal, not a personal failure. A 10 to 20-minute low-intensity walk is the precise intervention. Not a workout, not a run. High-intensity exercise in this window spikes cortisol, adding load to an already overloaded system. Light movement supports the natural cortisol decline your body is already trying to complete. And over time, it directly reduces the visceral fat pattern from signal 1. The third reset addresses the sugar craving cycle from signal 5. The most effective combination is protein paired with fat, not a low-calorie substitute, not more willpower. When the post-stress craving hits, redirect it within 15 minutes. A handful of mixed nuts, a piece of hard cheese, or a boiled egg, any of these work. Protein and fat stabilize blood sugar without triggering the insulin spike that amplifies the next craving. Over 2 to 3 weeks, this combination begins to reset the brain's dopamine response to stress signals. That directly reduces the intensity of signal 5 and interrupts the visceral fat storage loop from signal 1. These 5 signals are not just about belly fat or poor sleep. They are early warning markers for a process that compounds silently over decades. Adults who begin regulating cortisol patterns in their 50s show measurably better cognitive function at age 80. Better cardiovascular markers, lower biological age, less visceral fat accumulation. That's what cortisol literacy is, not just feeling better tomorrow, but functioning clearly at 80. If this video helped you see your body's signals differently, share it with someone over 50 who needs it. The people who benefit most from this are often the ones who don't yet realize they need it. In the next video, we go inside the liver, the organ that processes this exact cortisol load. We look at exactly which foods age your liver fastest and which ones protect it. I'll see you there.